Welcome back to Clarity Convos for Wedding Pros Podcast. I'm your host, Aislinn, and today we have another special guest. I am so excited to get into today's podcast interview because we are going to be talking to Shannon, who is going to be talking to you guys about time management as a creative, time management as a wedding pro. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. If you've ever listened to me talk pretty much anywhere, it's probably about time management or mindset. It's one of those things. So today I'm really excited to nerd out with Shannon all about time management. Shannon, come on, let's introduce you to my audience.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited too.
I know. So a little bit about my world. I nerd out on time management like you do. So when we were talking about topics, I was so excited because I'm like, not everybody gets as excited about it as I do.
It's me. I am the person who will talk to you about like time blocking, and I'll talk to you all about color coding and controlling your calendar. Like the things we're going to talk about today, like just be prepared. This might be a long episode.
It gets very exciting.
So tell me a little bit more about your background. Tell me a little bit more about your career, because I know like you've been in the industry for a really long time.
Yeah, my entire career has been in the wedding industry as a wedding pro. I started in offsite catering, made the move from offsite catering to just one venue. I went from bopping in and out of different venues to working at one venue. And after 10 years combined, I was just ready for a break from brides. Like, long story short, I needed a break. And I needed that time to breathe. And I love the digital marketing aspect of everything to do with finding leads and creating leads and the sale conversion. And so I stepped away and ended up creating and building a local directory here. I'm based in Central Florida. So I own a local directory called Wedding Venue Map. And it's really cool because I get to live in this cool, unique space in between being a free resource for couples planning their wedding and the venues that they're searching for. And so I feel like I get like insider knowledge and tips. And through the years, that has been able to convert to a second company called Venue Help Desk, where I still run Wedding Venue Map, but really focusing on bringing that tips and the education and the things we've learned that's super venue specific to the venues all across the country. So that's where I spend about split brain 50-50 in between Wedding Venue Map and Venue Help Desk.
I love that so much. And for my audience, I just want you guys to like be in on this with us. So Shannon and I have actually run into each other when I lived in the Central Florida market. It was probably 10 years ago at this point, but we ran in the same city at the same time. And like, I know we were at networking events. I know I've met you before, but it's so cool to be sitting here on a podcast in 2025, being able to share where our careers took us and being able to give back to the community and being able to create like spaces where knowledge is shared. Like, I love that so much that both of us kind of took that pathway.
Yeah, because when we all struggle bus our way through of what do I do and how do I do it and what's the best way for me to do it. And then when you gain that knowledge, if you can help impart that to other people through things like podcasts or social media and things like that, all of that makes such a huge difference in being able to guide them through not hitting the same speed bumps along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dig into time management, because I know this is a huge topic for wedding professionals and creatives everywhere. So I want to start talking about like the basics of time management. So things like deep focus work. So this is something I nerd out about, and like it's something I talk about with my clients all the time, but I want to hear your thoughts on how do you set up deep focus work? What is it? What are some tips that people can go implement? Like, let's make this super practical today.
I love it. So I think the hardest part when you are, especially as a wedding pro specifically, you give so much of your time to your clients and helping them and guiding them and making sure that their event is incredible no matter what it is you do. But all of that is like day-to-day mundane of checking email, checking boxes, doing tasks. And while that is all super necessary, when you don't set aside the time to look at the big picture projects and what do you want to look at in terms of moving the company and the needle forward this year, whether it's hiring support staff. People always tell me, I don't have time to hire people because I don't have time to train them, because training is deep work. Like, you've got to create for all of these things that you want to achieve each year, each quarter, each month, whatever it is. You have to set the time aside to be able to do it and focus on it. And that's how I would explain deep work to somebody who's like, I don't know what that is.
I love that. It's kind of the difference between working on your business and working in your business. So if you find yourself, like, let's say you're a photographer, if you find yourself like all you're doing is editing and all you're doing is posting on social media and all you're doing is answering emails or making timelines, if that's all you're doing, that is in your work business. versus kind of like we were talking about, like with training new people, training new hires, or like doing like vision board work, or kind of thinking about where you want to take your company, or setting up like new skill sets. So like if you don't have the skill set to sell at a higher price point, taking time to learn how to sell better could be deep work because it's working on the business, not in the business.
Yeah.
So I love that definition so much. So when you think about like deep work on a day to day, because I think we just made that very 30,000 foot where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
this is just like
Of course.
the
Big
the
picture.
thing you do. Yeah. Let's talk about day to day. Like, how do you do deep work? Even some people are going to be like, I can't do deep work day to day. I promise you can. But also,
Yeah.
like, there are ways to set up the systems and the structures for deep work to happen. Let's start out on a weekly basis. What could it look like?
Yeah, the biggest thing is figuring out what's the goal you want to achieve. So you've set that goal and now you start to outline that into the tasks because you're not always going to be able to sit down, block an entire 8-hour day and deep work for the whole day. So you've got to start to divide the big picture project. You know, my mom used to always say to me when I was young, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's really what sometimes deep work is. It's about focus time. So when I look at the course of the calendar of my week, I really started to control the calendar and the pieces in part to be able to make space for deep work and knowing that like my zone of genius is always in the morning. I'm an early riser. I'm the opposite of most wedding pros. I'm an early cranker. Like get up and I will crank. So from that, like my best zone of genius for deep work is from like 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Like I can not check my inbox, staying outside of things. But I don't do it every day. I don't deep work every day, but I time block it specifically on my calendar like it's an appointment. So with whatever the task is I'm going to do, it's great to have the list of tasks in project management like Asana or, Monday.com or wherever you track the tasks. But it's important to time block it specifically into your calendar so that you're holding space for it like it's an appointment.
Not to out myself for being a productivity nerd.
Yeah.
I literally Q4 of last year, I bought a productivity course and it like has like focused labs where you go do like body doubling with other people. So like what that means is essentially like you're on a Zoom call, other people are working on whatever task they're working on and you're working on whatever task you're working on. And you can't have your phone out. You can't have notifications on. You have one mono task that you're working on for 50 minutes at a time. And I was actually watching a really good YouTube video about this from a fitness influencer / creator on YouTube. And she was talking about how like you can set yourself up for better deep work by like thinking of it like a workout where like the first 5 minutes of your workout should be warm up. So like that should be like putting on your binaural beats or putting on the music that you're going to listen to while you're like getting into the deep work that you're doing. And then having a block between, I think it was 90 and 120 minutes, which to be, is that the same thing? Yeah, no. It was like an hour and a half.
Close. Yeah, close.
So I usually do 50 minutes at a time of deep work. But for me, what I like to do is warm up, do the deep work, and then I like to go do something that has movement involved. So dance party, go for a walk, get some sunshine, go eat something, go drink water, some kind of like movement to break things up. So when we're talking about deep work, I'm not saying sit at your desk for 8 hours a day. And I don't think Shannon's saying that either.
No.
It's almost like more like blocks of time where
Yeah.
you have like, it's like the warm up, the deep work, and then the cool down. So the cool down is 5 minutes of reflecting on what you just did, which is kind of like extra. You don't have to do that. But that's how I set up my deep work. And before we move on to this, there are a couple books that I want you guys to go look at if you're interested in learning more about this kind of stuff. The first one is actually called Deep Work by Cal Newport. Newport? Yeah, Newport. And I'll read you guys a quote really quick because I thought this was really, really relevant. Who you are, what you think, feel, and do, what you love, is the sum of what you focus on, which I think is so beautiful. And this book is so good teaching you around like the topic of focus. Another really great book is called Feel Good Productivity by Ali Abdaal. Both of those are amazing if you want to dig deeper into this topic.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think that it's always looking for the tools. It's got to be practical. It's not conceptual, right? And so you hit on something huge about turning off notifications. It's so basic to think of how much we get distracted when you're trying to do deep work. And so things like, you might not even know that I'm an iPhone user. I don't know what to tell you, but I am. But like, in your iPhone, you can actually set certain apps to allow certain notifications at certain times of day. So you can say, I don't want to see a notification from Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, any of that stuff from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. So then it just won't send them through. You don't even have to go as far as to airplane mode the phone, because I need a sales call. If somebody's calling me for money, I got to answer that phone. So I can't full airplane mode, but I can do things like remove the distractions sometimes, and the notifications were a lot of that on both my desktop and on my phone, just turning them all off.
Yeah, there's something to be said here too about, like you said, you were a morning person, which I am definitely a morning person
Yeah.
as well. I had to kind of train myself to be a morning person, but I definitely am now. So for the first like 2 hours of the day, I have an app that actually, and you can do this inside of Apple itself, but I have an app separately for it that will turn off different apps on my phone. So like I can't get a hold of Instagram or TikTok or my email or Slack or anything until around 9 o'clock in the morning. So the first, like, I'm up at 5 most days. Like, so the
Yeah.
first like 4 hours of my day, I am doing things for me that will help me focus better later in the day. Because if you get up, let's say you get up at 7 and you start scrolling your phone, you are just like giving away your best focused hours to scrolling
Yeah.
your phone. And like we know a lot about dopamine now, like it really is like one of those things where if you can stay off your phone until a little bit later, and I'm not saying like completely off your phone, but at least stay off the scrolling spaces on your
Yeah.
phone, it can really help a lot with focus and concentration.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. One of the other things I really love to do is I really like to step away sometimes when I'm doing deep work. So I have a desktop, huge Mac, double screen, love it. But sometimes I need to be in a different space. And sometimes that means like I just have to crank out all these Canva designs. I can do Canva on the couch. Now, I'm not putting on the TV, but I can be in a different space that makes me feel like that's where I do the creative type of things. Or there's a ton of venues in every market you probably have relationships with, and most of them sit in empty most of the week. So saying, you know what, I really want to go work on this project for a few hours, maybe they'll let me use their conference room. Like taking myself away from my normal space sometimes really helps when it comes to deep work.
I love that. Also, I'm totally going to look up the venues nearby and see if I can start going to like the conference rooms. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
A lot of times they'll let you, especially if you've got relationships with them and you're on their preferred vendor list or whatever, like, or you say, hey, listen, if I can use this to work on this project, my team, we team retreat at venues all over town and we make social content for them, like just highlighting them and featuring them. And they're always happy to get that shout out.
I love that. So before we move on from deep focus work, like, are there any other things that you want to touch on with that topic?
I think really leaning in onto the blocking the time, right? And we'll dig more into controlling the calendar, but I think looking at it like it's an appointment and making things be on repeat. There's certain things like every month, the last Friday of the month, I block 4 hours and I call it my CEO day, because sometimes the 30th and the first, it all hits on the other day. But it's repetitive. I set them as repeating tasks on my calendar. So my CEO day hits, and that means in that 3 hour, 4 hour block, I have to pull all my analytics, make sure all the finance is done, control the P&L, like all of those things that I have to do as a business owner, or that are the big picture. If you report to someone else, your monthly reports, my tracking, but that's blocked consistently every month, all the time, so that I don't have to remember to add it. I just set it on repeat.
Yeah. And if you have a neurospicy brain that like whatever is in front of you is the thing that you're like thinking about, and you don't think like, oh, I should be like doing my profit and loss right now. Being able to put this stuff on your calendar and then all of a sudden it's February 1st and it's a CEO day and you're like, oh yeah, I am going to do that today. That right there is going to save you so much heartache in the future, because you're going to have like these things already like in your calendar and you're just going to do them because they're already like put in there. So if you're listening to this podcast right now and you are not driving or doing anything else that's like distracted, if you're able to, what I want you to do is take some of the stuff that we talked about already in this podcast, like the CEO days, and just go like the next quarter. So like maybe this comes out in February or March, go into Q2, go into Q3, and go ahead and put CEO day blocks at the end of your month or the beginning of your month. Just go ahead and put it in there. And like, you'll be really nicely surprised in a couple months when you're like, oh, today's a CEO day. But if you do that at the beginning of the year, you're going to like be setting yourself up for really smooth sailing the rest of the year.
Love it.
Let's talk about calendars, because I feel like we've already kind of touched on this, but when I started really scaling my businesses, my calendar became like the thing that I had to look at basically all the time. And it's so beautiful because you could say like, oh, your calendar is controlling you. But in fact, because my calendar is so structured, I actually have more free time to go read a book or play Switch or go like on a walk with my dogs because I have the things in my calendar that I know what to do instead of it just being this like free for all, like, oh, what should I be doing right now? Like probably something in my calendar. It tells me what I'm doing.
Yeah,
So let's talk about that.
controlling the time. I think the busier you get, as a newer business owner, you look at everything through the lens of, do I have time or money? If I have money, I pay somebody to maybe outsource and do some of the things, but I've got nothing but time. So even then, starting to structure and say, what am I doing when, on what days that makes the most sense? My wedding venue map business is majority B, right? Obviously, we create content and stuff for engaged couples, but majority of the business is B2B. I am not dumb enough to email other vendors on a Friday thinking and expecting a response, right? So I know that on Fridays are not my customer service days because that's not where my customers and when they're available to have those conversations or do those meetings. So you start to, as time gets tighter, it matters more. My phrase of the year in 2024 was minutes matter. And it was very like manage the time and where those minutes get lost. And so starting to control your own schedule instead of letting other people, I think we let other people control it for us because we let them suggest times for appointments, or we create a calendar booker, but it's wide open and available. I think when we do that, like, we're letting them take control, and you have to control your own time.
Yeah, I think like to that point, if you are someone who has a calendar and it is wide open right now, what I want you to do is go in and decide what days of the week, and let's just use photographers for example, what days of the week are you shooting versus what days of the week are you editing? And right now, it just is literally for a lot of you are going to listen to that and be like, what do you mean? What do you mean you can edit on different days than you're shooting? And what it actually means is like maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays are the days that people can book you for photo shoots. Wednesdays and Fridays are your editing days. So if somebody comes along and they're like, oh, I only have Wednesdays, you could maybe give them a Wednesday, but they have to wait 2 months in order to like book it. And like the same thing with Saturdays and Sundays, like your weekends should be more precious than you are allowing them to be if your calendar is wide open. The other thing about this is that from like a sales psychology side, like it's really nice for people to see that you are not wide open calendar. Like they want to see that you have very specific dates. If they don't like have that date or that like schedule, they're going to ask you like, hey, can I have a Saturday? And you're going to say, yeah, my next Saturday that's available is in 2 months from now. So they're either going to change their schedule or like they're going to book that Saturday 2 months from now.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you said. It's about, I'm the biggest proponent of an online calendar booker, whether you use Calendly, Acuity, whether you're using the HoneyBook Dubs Auto version. I don't really care what you use, but that having that online calendar, all of those things, you can take it just like one step further and say that appointment type, I only do on these days in these blocks, right? I protect my zone of genius. I don't do appointments in general before 11 a.m. Like I know when. Even sometimes we'll have people like, we're here recording this and it's a Friday at 5 o'clock. Other people are like, what the heck are you doing recording a podcast on Friday at 5 p.m.? But now's the time of day where I'm happy to have conversations and creative because I can't deep work right now. I can share tips, but I can't deep work. And so once you start to limit the time, this is the link that Aislinn sent over, has the link of availability. And so if I want to be on her podcast, I have to meet what her availability is. And once you start changing that and you start to be the one, I never say things like, let me know when you're available, ever. Like, it's always about, are you available on this day or this day on this time? Or what about this one day and one time? And then what I have learned to control the calendar so I don't screw up is I then go soft block it. If I send somebody a date and a time, I put it in the calendar and I have all these crazy little calendar things like question marks. If it's not confirmed yet, if it's a networking event, I put a $sign before it if I bought the ticket. Like, because once you start to control the minutes, you have to make sure you don't over triple book yourself. And so you figure out these little cues for yourself on how to make sure you don't make the mistakes.
Love that. Also, I have I think 7 or 8 different types of Calendly links because I take on different types of Calendly meetings. So I've got like my podcast, I've got my one-on-one calls for private clients. So they have a separate calendar that they can book dates from. I have my Success Accelerator program has separate like call like dates that they can book from. People who are booking intensives have a different day. People who are booking for my mastermind for one-on-one calls have a different day. And it's so nice because I can just send them the link for what they're doing. And the thing is that like, yeah, if somebody came to me and they're like, hey, I really want to be on your podcast, and I send them like the fact that I mostly have Fridays available, if not only Fridays, and they're like, Aislinn, I'm sorry, I can't do Fridays. I would say, okay, cool. What days of the week are better for you? And I'll see what's on my calendar that I can
Right.
give to you. But usually when I do that, I can't give them anything within like a 2-week period because my calendar is pretty like
Full
it's
and
it's
set.
pretty full at that
Yeah.
point. But it's really beautiful because like I love Friday conversations for the podcast because I feel like it's the end of the week. Like you've had like a lot of thoughts, you've had a lot of like things, you're excited for the weekend. So it's great to have podcast interviews. I used to allow them to be like earlier in the week. And I was like, well, that takes away from me working on my business. So you also have to kind of like think about with your calendar, where are you giving up time where you could be working on your business versus
Yeah.
in your business? I think that's a really important thing to note.
Yeah, even things like internal meetings, right? Like I've got a staff and I have a team and they used to love to do their meetings on Friday mornings. Well, I would get them all jazzed up and we'd go through their priorities and blah, blah, blah. But then it was Friday. And so then Monday would come around, they'd be like, what the heck was I supposed to be working on? Not because the weekend came in between. And I was like, listen, we've got to do these on Mondays. Like we have to shift. And as much as I do my best always to accommodate where I can, a lot of times I've found that when you say no, they will match to you. And so for the wedding pro who's even doing this when it comes to sales appointments, they're like, well, no, but it's money and I've got to take it whenever I can. I'm like, you don't within reason, right? Like you don't, but you do have to realize that maybe you get a lot of requests for nighttime appointments. Of course, people have to work during the day. You got to do a sales call in the evening. So maybe you're like, I do a call on Wednesday is my late day. I do a 5 o'clock, a 6 o'clock, a 7 o'clock call. And Wednesdays, you take that morning for yourself. And then you work until 8 o'clock at night on Wednesdays. So you can create that structure and learn to control. It's like mind blowing how much people will just fall in line when you start
Yeah.
to make this shift.
It's wild too, because whenever a client comes to me for private coaching or mastermind, they're generally like further along in their business and they're generally starting to do things like scaling or running multiple businesses. And so what we'll do in that first onboarding call is we literally will make an ideal calendar for them. And then it's usually in Google itself. But like, I'll be like, okay, like when are we blocking this thing? When are we blocking this thing? And every single time I show it to a client, they're just like, I didn't even think you could do this. And I'm like, yeah. Like, so if you're listening to this, I want you guys to think about, okay, if I looked at Monday through Friday on my calendar, when would I want to have, let's just say you're a photographer, because I know a lot of you guys are, or a planner. Like if you wanted to like look at your calendar Monday through Friday, when are you going to do consultation calls? What days of the week do you want to do later consultations versus earlier consultations? What days are you going to be out of the house? Maybe this is for out of the house networking events or out of the house like meetings, or maybe it's out of the house where you go to a coffee shop and what days are you wanting to do focus work where you turn off your notifications, you maybe make content or blogs or kind of like some of the deeper things that need to happen that are going to push your business forward, like SEO. So just like kind of like thinking about all of that and thinking about like, where do you want to put things in your calendar? And then just recognize like fun, we are our own bosses. We actually get to make these calendars. Like nobody's doing it
Yeah.
for us. So you have to do it yourself.
Yeah. And it's controlling those minutes and those things. It's about as simple as blocking things like when we go to networking events, I spend a lot of my life driving to venues, right? Sometimes those venues are 30 minutes away. Sometimes they're an hour away. When we put the appointment in, we block drive time on either side, especially if you're using an online appointment booker, because I don't want to be doing Zoom calls from the car. Like I can't be doing two things at the same time. So starting to look through and say, if I'm going to do 4 site visits a week, I can do 3 in a day. My staff can't handle more than 2. It's like mind burning for them. So they would rather wake up in the morning, check emails, do their first appointment. I'd rather crank them out and be out of the house one day, right? But it's about figuring out what are those personal preferences. I block social content. We like every 3 months, I sit down one day, I just keep changing my shirt. I sit on this green wall and I just crank through tips videos and I just change my shirt, change my earrings, change my shirt, change my earrings. But in an hour, I literally can make easily, like no question, anywhere from like 20 to 25 tips videos. And then my social media manager used them on stories on Tuesdays. So we batch as much as we can, but then those batch things become repeatable inside the calendar. So there's no more like, oh, I'm out. Sorry. Like there's never, you're making a plan.
Yeah. And I'll kind of go one step deeper on this. I love that you batch things like that. What days of the week do you want to put makeup on? What days of the week
Yes.
do you want to get fully
Oh
dressed?
my
What
God.
days,
Oh my
what days of
God.
the week do you want to do hair?
Oh, you are speaking my language always. That I'm like yesterday, I had a few coaching meetings and they were on Zoom. And because of the holiday and people were off, my event manager texted me. It was like, I'm going to make assumptions that you look okay today since you're on Zoom calls with clients. Can you just bust out 2 or 3 quick promo videos for the event and send them to me? And I'm like, I wouldn't say I'm like perfectly polished, hair's in a pony, but like I've got makeup on, I'll make the videos, right? But you don't want, normally on Fridays, this is only cute for you today. Normally Fridays, I'm literally in like sweats. I don't do external appointments ever. So it's nice because then I know I can wake up on Friday and go. I don't have to do those extra steps, save myself those minutes.
Yes, yes, all of that. I was talking to one of my private clients today about creative rest. And I feel like this is like something that like, you can lean into is like, what days of the week do you not want to like do external things? Like what days of the week do you want to like be doing like internal things? Like maybe you're editing and you're not putting a full face of makeup on and doing 30 reels and like batching stuff. And that gets to be okay. But I think like being a lot more intentional about it is going to feel
Yeah.
a lot better because then you don't have to do like you don't have to be on every day. And I
Yeah.
think that's a mistake that a lot of wedding professionals make is that they have to be on every day. They either have to be on a Zoom call or they have to go somewhere and be seen. And it's like, guys,
No.
like I don't want to be seen every day of the month. Like y'all don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. I don't want to
Yep.
be that. Like so building in that creative rest in your schedule, I think is like really, really beautiful.
Yeah, it's a game of strategy though, right? I know I'm scheduled to go to a NACE meeting on the last Tuesday night of the month, and someone reaches out to me and is like, oh, I'd love to get coffee with you, blah, blah, whatever. And I'm like, well, why don't we just meet up? It's at a hotel. Why don't we just meet up in the hotel bar? We can grab a glass of wine before the meeting. Like, why don't we? I already have to go there. So then, and that also then limits and controls the time, of the things. Or this is so terrible, but I'll give you one of my dirty, dirty tips for the amount of times people are like, let's get coffee. Here's the problem. I'm like, I would love to get coffee with you on Zoom and we can jump on a coffee call. I will send them a $5 Starbucks gift card. I mean, they're not going to run out and get the coffee, but like, I'll buy your coffee, your next coffee, if I don't have to leave my house. And we can both just sit and drink coffee. No judgment, what you're wearing, what I'm wearing, the kids running around, the cats running around, it doesn't matter. But when people are like, oh, I'd really like to meet in person, I'm like, no problem. This is where she gets a little dirty. I'm like, no problem. Where are you coming from in town? Central Florida's huge, guys. It's huge. And they're like, oh, I live over here. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to be over here. Why don't we meet in the middle at this coffee place? And that coffee place is always 5 minutes away from my house. I pick the closest place to me. If you're not willing to do it on Zoom, we're going to meet. And then when I sit down, I tell them, listen, like, I'm so excited to connect today and use our time, whatever, but I've got other stuff after this. So I'm going to set a timer because I lose track of time. So that timer goes off and I'm like, I got about 10 minutes left. Like I do the things to control the time without being rude. I'm setting expectations, but I was like, I can't be driving 45 minutes across town to have coffee with someone who, don't take this the wrong way, but you need me more than I need you. I want to connect. I just don't need the drive time.
Yeah, I have literally done all of those things. And if you guys have not heard this story, I did 77 free coffee dates in 2020 to 2021. They were all on Zoom.
Yep.
They were all on Zoom. I made connections with wedding vendors all across the country. And I promise you, you do not need to meet people in person in order to form a bond and in order to form a relationship. So the people who are like, oh, I want to meet in person, honestly, like your time is more valuable than that. And like, if you suggest like, oh, let's do a Zoom call instead, that way we don't have to leave our house, it's very likely they're going to say yes to that. So I love this tip because it really like plays well into time management. Sometimes time management is saying no. Sometimes time management is saying, you know what? I love that you want to meet me and want to connect with me. I can't do that this month, but what about next month and on a Zoom call?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
it's okay to say that. Like, you just have to get more confident and comfortable in terms of controlling. And I think people tend to respect those and look at you through a different lens when you're somebody who controls the time, right? When you're
Yes.
somebody who says, like, my time is valuable and so is yours. So, do you think, would you be open to the idea of doing it on Zoom, of us having coffee and whatever that looks like? Yeah, it makes a huge, I love the idea of saying, I'm good. Because so many people are like, I don't have time to go to networking events. I don't have the money to pay for a ticket to a networking event at this point in my business or whatever. And I respect that. But then you've got to find a way to still network.
Yeah. Yeah. And like 77 free coffee dates in 2020, like made me realize that like networking is actually way easier than a lot of people make it.
Yeah.
And I actually prefer one-on-one. Like this is kind of why I love podcasts so much
Yeah.
is like we get to have like a great conversation and there's very
Yeah.
few distractions. Like it's just us. But like you could do the same thing with a coffee date with another vendor that you want to work with. And like sometimes they're going to say no and that's okay. But this is one of those things where it's like, can we think about time management in a different way? Can we think about networking in a different way? And can we be the leaders and be the ones suggesting, let's do a Zoom date instead of just like being like, oh, well, they asked for a coffee date, so I have to drive 45 minutes.
Right.
No, no, ma'am, you don't.
No.
You absolutely
No, you
don't.
don't. And I think, with the world of Zoom, it's been nice too, because there are certain times that people are like, well, I can't, I stay at home with my kids or I whatever. And I'm like, I did a coaching call yesterday and her 3-year-old was in her lap and we recorded it and she listened and she heard, but this one was sick and that one had to go do. And she's like, I have to cancel. And I literally can't reschedule for weeks. And I'm like, here's the options. Either we go today and I'm totally fine with the fact that there's a 3-year-old in your lap, or it's going to be weeks. And she's like, God, I really need to get this done. I'm like, well, we'll do it. I'll record it in case you get distracted or you miss anything. And then you've got the video and you can go back and watch it. And she was like, thank you so much for being understanding, flexible. People appreciate it.
Yeah. And I think this is like when we were talking about the calendar, this is kind of something to think about is like what takes the most amount of effort. And like I say effort and it's not quite the right word, but like going somewhere physically in person in order to network is like the maximum amount of effort. You
Yeah.
have to drive, you have to put on clothes, like you have to put on makeup, like you have to like be an on human like that,
Yeah.
like they can connect with.
Yeah.
Zoom, I would say, is the secondary version of that
Yeah.
because like you still have to show up. You still have to like show your face. Phone calls would be like one lesser than that. And
Right.
then an email would kind of be like that next step. And so could you like start to look at like your calendar and start to look at the things you're doing? Maybe you don't have to do in-person consultations. Like when you're
Yeah.
doing consultations, if you're going to meet somebody at a coffee shop in person, you could do a phone call and probably still book them. In fact, I know you could still book them.
Yeah. It's
Ma-
shocking, I think, to see how much you can sell over the phone now, because they also, your clients and after they've been at work all day and in meetings all day, they don't have the energy either. Like
Yeah.
they're okay with wanting to be on the couch, chilling out, either Zoom or even just on the phone. Like, yes, they don't want to talk on the phone and have you cold call them, but doing an appointment on the phone, they're happy to do it because they're not doing that all day.
Yeah. And if you want to make it more personal, you can ask them if they want to FaceTime with you or if they
Yep.
want to like do just a phone call. Either one is fine. But we definitely throughout like the years, like of being a wedding professional and now like into coaching, like I've made it to where I don't have to expend the most amount of energy for it to be a win for me and a win for the person across the
Yeah.
table from me. And I think that's really, really beautiful.
Yeah, it's a huge shift. And the time and the feeling of you having control over things instead of letting the business and the tasks and the things control you, it's so life-changing.
Yeah. And especially as you're scaling a business, like, those first like couple of years, like it might not feel like you have a control over your calendar, but at any point you get to decide, okay, I'm going to start taking control of this. I'm going to start
Yep.
taking control of my time management, which I think leads beautifully into like, I know that you love to color code your calendars. So I really want to talk about this. I think this is like such a great topic to kind of like dig into after we talked about controlling your calendar and
Yeah.
defocus work. Cause this is kind of the like extra super nerdy layer that we need to add on top.
Yeah. If you've gotten enough, don't turn us off, because this is where we're really getting nerdy. But so the long story short was, I had hit a point before I started the second company and the first company, and I was just running Wedding Venue Map, and I hadn't hired enough staff yet. And I was just drowning in tasks and drowning in things. And I'm a firm believer in investing money in a coach, going and finding somebody who knows better. So I hired a productivity coach, and I had her sit down with me and really figure out, what were the right tasks for me to be spending time on? What should I be outsourcing? that's easy to outsource, things like bookkeeping and stuff like that, really wasn't worth my energy in terms of assigning expenses. Like, who cares? Like, I care, but I don't need to be doing that. And part of that was once we figured out where my focus should be, we started to look at the time it takes to do all of those things. And so we looked at the time, but then we started to categorize them. And so I started putting things in all these different buckets. There were like sales behaviors, like sales appointments, site visits, blah, blah, blah. There were marketing behaviors, whether I was scheduling social media posts, making content, writing a blog, whatever those pieces were at. But I started to put all of the different behaviors into these separate buckets. I'm a Google girl. So in Google Calendar and in wherever there's different colors that you can use within your calendar. So I sat down, I took all the colors available, which you can put in plugins and do more. Just work with what's there. Don't get crazy. And you don't need more than the 9 colors or whatever that exists. But each one of those colors got assigned a task, like a bucket of what were the different things I was doing. And what that allowed me to do was a few things. One, it allowed me to look at my calendar and see that I was putting too much time and energy in one thing or another. And so if I look at the calendar and nothing was dark blue, which were sales meetings and sales behaviors and sales calls, I was like, oh God, there's not enough sales calls on the calendar this week. And I could on Monday hum through filling a few of those spots in. Or, I run my personal calendar and my business calendar in the same space. Sorry, I own a company. I juggle too many. I don't have kids. So like it all lives in one home. And what I was finding was I was working so much, I was doing nothing for myself. Or rarely. And when I wouldn't put it on the calendar. So I chose red, which is a glaring color on the calendar for anything personal, whether that was a doctor's appointment, a massage, going to the gym, going out to dinner with my girlfriends, right? So it's crazy sometimes when people see my calendar on my phone and they're like, whoa. And I'm like, it doesn't overwhelm me. I can know that I'm speaking today because it's a weird salmon pink color. So when I open my calendar for tomorrow, I'm like, crap, I got to do my hair and makeup because someone's going to see me because of that color on the calendar. And so it's a life-changing. I mean, my entire team does it. They have their own colors, like they color code it how they want. But when you start to do it, it's so life-changing and it moves. It's just quicker visuals.
Love that. And like the human brain loves visuals. Like you can
Yes.
process visual information faster than like almost any other kind of information that you can get. So I
Yep.
love that so much. I have like something similar for my calendar, but like I have like multiple calendars. So I have a personal calendar
Yeah.
and then I have a business calendar and then I have like Success Accelerator program calendar. So like if like we have like an extra call for SAP, it goes on that calendar. It doesn't go on my
Yeah.
personal or my business. And then sometimes when I'm in a launch, I will have a separate launch calendar, which will tell me like, you're in pre-sale right now, or hey, you need to go live today, which it helps so much just to kind of like start your day knowing like, okay, this is the segment that I need to think about. What's the next segment that I'm going into? Okay, it's a speaking segment. Maybe I should get dressed.
Yeah.
Maybe I should go to the gym at 7 a.m. instead of 10 o'clock in the evening or whatever. So I love that. I also love that you did personal as glaring red and that you noticed that you didn't have enough personal in there because
Yeah.
I think creatives like don't balance their time very well. And like you have to have the personal stuff. Like otherwise, like what's the point?
Yeah. It's not just about, it was so glaring once I gave it a color. It was still 1 month even after it had a color, but I was constantly like, there's nothing red this week. And so I'd look at it and say to my boyfriend, let's go on a date. Like, let's get a date night on the calendar. And it wasn't that I wasn't sometimes doing the things. I just wasn't putting it in the place where I'd be able to see it. I tried to manage the multiple calendars. We have multiple calendars within the company where I have like a master events calendar and that we can turn on and turn off. And then if it applies to you, we invite ourselves to it. And then I'll color code it. But too many multiple calendars didn't work. It didn't work for me. So it was easier for me to just say, let it all live in one space. And anything that's like a campaign or something large that isn't daily, that lives on that one other. But yeah, you have to figure out what works for you. I have an amazing new member manager. She's so wonderful. She's 26 and she's so task-based and task-oriented and she was falling behind. And so literally this morning in her like one-on-one, I said, I really want to focus today on time management. She's like, what do you mean? What do you mean? I manage time. And I'm like, don't get defensive. Like, let's talk through some of the things. You get all these tasks when someone renews that are like checky brainless, go follow them on Instagram, like basic stuff. And she's in my same B2B space. I'm like, what if instead of those falling on whatever day it gets assigned for, what if we just decide they're always going to be on Fridays? So when you open Asana and you look at your Friday tasks, you know that on your calendar Friday morning, you can just block for 2 hours renewal tasks. And you know that. And she's like, I don't need it to be like that. And I was like, okay. So I gave it a minute and I'm like, what you're doing isn't working. So what are you going to do different? And then as we started to talk through her projects, I'm like, how long is that blog going to take to write? She said about 4 hours. I said, on Wednesday, right? She said, yeah. I'm like, why don't you put that on your calendar? And instead of it just being a task, it wasn't an easy task. It was a 4-hour time. And so getting her to shift her mind about halfway through the meeting, she's like, oh, that might work better. I was like, it's not that you aren't doing things. It's just you're bouncing back and forth a lot. And when you can start to batch it together and you're assigning time to a task, instead of it just being a task, a networking event isn't 2 hours. It's 2 hours. It's an hour drive time. It's an hour drive time back. It's the day after a networking event. I block 30 minutes to do my follow-up emails. Otherwise, what the heck did I bother waste my time to go for, right? You do a wedding show on a Sunday, then that Monday, you better block that whole darn day to go chase those leads and follow up with things. Like, you've got to start thinking in terms of time, not just tasks.
Yeah. And it's not just the time of the task. It's also like the time like around it, like you just said.
Yeah.
And one of the things like I kind of wanted to mention, they talk about this all the time in the different productivity books that I've been, the course that I took around productivity. I'm sure your like productivity coach talked about this too. Like switching between tasks is really, really not great for the brain. If you can do like, if your entire Wednesday is just writing tasks, so editing writing tasks like making a blog post or writing emails or making templates that have to do like written things or doing follow up where you're emailing people, that is one type of task.
Yeah.
If instead you decided to do, I'm going to do editing today, I'm going to go out of the house today, I'm going to do a networking event today, I'm also going to write a blog post, I'm also going to make a social media post, you are switching between tasks and you are like going to be way more inefficient at it, but also it's going to burn you out.
Yeah.
So this is why like we're like such huge advocates of like blocking tasks, is because it's so good for the brain, but also like you're going to get way more efficient and get more done.
And don't you find that when people, or I talk to people and I'm like, damn, how do you get so much done? Because people say that about me. It's always people who time manage. Like
Always.
It's always people have figured out that secret sauce. And so instead of it being about, what's your best I'm always like, what's your best time management hack? Like, what do you got that I don't know? Is there an app you use? Is there something like, that you use to stay on task? Like, what is that? Because people who you're seeing accomplish things and grow your business and whatever, they're making the time for what's important to do that deep work and to move the needle of their business forward.
Yeah, and their calendars probably would scare the crap out of you.
Yeah, literally.
Like literally, if you could look at our calendars, I'm sure it's like 18 things deep on each day.
Yeah, and it's hard to say no to things. I mean, my boyfriend has a humongous Italian family, and there is never a Tuesday night that there isn't a freaking birthday, that there's not a Saturday, a kid birthday party. There's stuff all the time. And there's certain times that I can be at things and I try to be present. We've learned to communicate differently, that I ask him, would you like me to go to that event with you? He also learns that sometimes, like tonight, I need to be here doing this, and then we'll plan dinner later. But it's also okay for me to say no. But I've trained the people around me to know that the time matters. And now even my mother-in-law, she's like a wild ride when they're like, oh, where's Shannon? And she now answers building the empire. Like, It's so, because I'm always like, guys, like, just saw you for like 3 days over Christmas. Like, I don't need to be at a kiddie birthday party on Saturday. Whether that means I'm taking time for myself, reading a book I want, deep work on a project I want to touch on. Like, I think when you're blessed to love what you do, sometimes it doesn't always feel like work, and it's okay to do it in the different spaces. But yeah, you just have to make those minutes work for you to find that success.
Yeah, absolutely. And like maybe you don't have like these dreams of building an empire or having a seven-figure business or like doing all these things, and that's okay. You can still take the things that we talked about today, whether that's controlling your calendar and like learning to say no a little bit more to things that like don't make sense, like with time management, being able to also color code your calendar, like take like tiny pieces of what we talked about today. And I think deep work is like, it's like my jam. Like I'm all about deep work.
I love it.
I would say like if you could just take one or two pieces from what we talked about today and try to implement them this week, and don't try to do all of them this week, don't try to do all of them this month.
No.
Just take pieces of them. And I think that you are going to find that when you are more intentional with your time, things start to really open up for you. Like there's a lot of things that you'll start to notice, like, oh, I have the opportunity to do that because you time blocked, because you did deep
Yeah.
work. You're able to say yes to the things that are so much more meaningful to you, and the opportunities show up a lot more because you've made space for them.
Yeah, completely. I'm not always the most religious human being, but I believe in the power of the universe putting me in the right places and the right times. And I do think that when you make space, it's amazing to see what great things come to fill it up.
Yeah. And I'll just like rapid fire some of the like productivity like things you were like asking, like, oh, are there like any apps or anything like
Yeah,
that?
what are some of your favorites?
Yeah, because I want to hear some of yours too. So obviously Google Calendar and like having the different calendars, I think is really
Mhm.
beautiful. One of the things that I did was I actually made my ideal calendar with time blocks, and it's on its own separate calendar. So I can kind of like check myself and check like, hey, it's Wednesday. What do I say that I'm supposed to be doing on Wednesdays? Oh, it's a block of X, Y, and Z. Okay, that makes sense. I'm going to go do that. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things I do. The Opal app, which is completely free, will block different apps on your phone, like Instagram or TikTok, or you can tell it what you want it to block. I have that on between, usually I think it turns on around 7 p.m. until 8 o'clock in the morning. So I don't scroll at nighttime. I don't scroll like in the morning. That's like just not my time to do that.
Yeah.
I also have it set up where like if like anyone texts me that like I don't really want to respond to immediately, like I have it set up where they can't text me during certain times, especially when I'm doing deep work. There's also an app on your desktop called Focus. I don't know if you've ever used that one before.
No.
It's like Pomodoro
Yeah.
timer. Love it. That one's great. There's a YouTube video called ADHD relief music, and it's binaural
I love
beats.
it.
Oh, good. It's so good. I get so much done with that one. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. The Ali Abdal Feel Good Productivity Deep Work is also a really good one. And then The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. All of those are really amazing books to read about this topic. So are there any like rapid fire like tips or resources you want to give?
Yeah, I mean, there's an app called Strides, and I sometimes find that all the tasks and checking off of tasks, but when it's about things that I need to be repeating and I'm really trying to make it a constant habit of different things, I love that the free version, you can set up 3 strides. So things like I have a stride that's drinking water and it's set for 3 times a day. It sets off a little like, that's one of the few notifications I let to come through. Even things like taking my vitamins in the morning. How many times do I miss that? Like, it's not medication, it's just the good stuff that I need to be taking, but I miss it. And so I love that app. It's so simple, it's so easy to use, but it's like a bit rather than it's like where I keep most of my personal things that are, goals I want to achieve and stuff like that. So that app is called Strides. I can't remember the name. I haven't used it in a while, but there used to be a focus app that I used that used to grow a tree. I just can't remember what it's called. It was like you turned it on, and like the longer if you picked up your phone, like to do something, you killed the tree and you had to start all over again. And it was like the goal. So that was fun because it like gamified staying focused in different ways. But Asana has been as a productivity, all the simple CRMs that are out there that most wedding pros use are very great for basic tasks, but they're not always built for task management. And so it's great if you have to like remind yourself to do a sales follow-up email, or they're 3 months into their planning, you need to send them the next thing. But when you're talking about big picture tasks for your business, those are not built for that. We've been using Asana it's ASANA is the app Asana, and we've been using it for the last 3 years. I don't know how these people continue to make money because I'm still on the free version. My whole team uses the free version. We don't have a paid version, and we do crazy things with it, tasks and subtasks, but it allows us to keep the project management moving forward, and it's all task oriented instead of it being an idea or a doc. So those are probably my most consistent, and the color coded calendar. I mean, that's the life changer. It all goes on there.
I love that. I love that. I am going to check out some of those ones that you just
Yeah.
mentioned. I have Asana and I love it. I actually have the paid versions now. I'm going to go look into it, see if I can get the free
Girl,
version.
we've never, every time I look at the things, I'm like, that's like more advanced than we need. I don't need to be tracking projects in that way. Like we can just assign the due dates and do it in a simple way. Yeah, I have no idea how that's still free. And if tomorrow they said it was paid, I would upgrade it, like, of course. So, but I think there's so many tools and free versions and hacks and stuff out there that you've just got to find what's going to work for you, whether it's setting timers and alarms. Like you have a lot of these tools. It's not about going to spend money to buy the next big thing. I mean, I love listening to audiobooks. I have a library card. I don't have an Audible. I don't pay monthly. I have a library card and I just download them on the library. You get 21 days to listen to them. Like there's so many great opportunities for learning out there. You just have to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you say you don't have to spend money. And I think that's actually where I want to wrap this up. So if you take anything from today, both of us said this multiple times where we don't have notifications on our phone because when it comes to focus and when it comes to time management, having notifications go off takes away your focus from whatever you're currently in. And it takes, I think there was like a study done where there was like a certain amount of minutes that it takes for you to get your focus back.
Yeah,
And it was
reset.
way more, I think it was like 23 minutes or something like
Yeah,
that. It
it's
was like,
something crazy.
yeah. So if you take anything away from this today, I don't want you to go buy an app. I don't want you to go buy Asana. What I
No.
want you to do is I want you to turn off notifications on your phone, whether it's Instagram, your email, Facebook, like Slack, whatever it is. I want you to turn off notifications on your phone. And what I want you to do is I want you to assign one part of your day, at least, that is the time that you check that. So like maybe like tomorrow, so we take notifications off your phone. Maybe tomorrow checking your email is from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. or whatever. And then you get off of your email and you don't get notifications. You will get so much more done, but also you'll be so much more focused and intentional with what you're doing. And like your clients and you both deserve your intentionality and your focus. So I think that's like kind of where I want to leave it.
I love it.
I would love to hear, how can people connect with you? How can people work with you? If you just want to give a spiel about that.
Yeah, if you're a venue and you live in the venue space and you've found me on here, or you want to learn more about venue things, Venue Help Desk is where all those things live, on Instagram, on the website. Even if you're not a venue, there's some really great free tools on our website that, even though it's not venue specific, things like a social media calendar of all the fun wedding industry holidays and things like that. So there's some great tools over on Venue Help Desk. If you're not a venue and you're like, Shannon, I speak at Wedding MBA every year. So if you come out to the conference, I have retired my podcast, but if you want to go check it out, it's called The Wedding Sassholes. We're very inappropriate. We have foul language all over the place. So I'm censoring for you if you're not interested, but we did about 85 episodes over 2 years. So you can go see me on The Wedding Sassholes, or you can find me on Instagram at The Shannon Experience. And I would love to hear what tip that you like implemented from what you learned today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Shannon, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It meant the world to me. I love that we got to nerd out about this for almost an hour.
Same.
Makes my heart so happy. I will be putting all of your information in the show notes so people can connect with you. But to my audience, I love you guys. I hope that you got so much out of this. Please send me an email at hello@aislinnaileen.com and we can chit chat about what you learned or your takeaways, or you can find me on Instagram at Aislinn Coaching. But I will see you on the next episode. Thanks again, Shannon.